let me get my box here. Perfect. It's much smaller than I expected it to be. Here's the deal. Monster hunting is a tough business, an epic business, and an incredibly long business. But for those of you with the dedication and time to slay the beasts, well, this might be a game for you. Let's get right into the general overview for Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters because there is a lot to cover here. I really like talking about mechanics and thinking about mechanics, and Silver Coin feels like a game where the creators had a game with a bunch of cool, fun mechanics in it, and they thought, just one more, and threw in another cool mechanic that's almost its own separate game. And it works. It really does. It just makes for an epic experience that I had to play on Tabletopia because my physical table was not big enough to house the prototype. And if that sort of size of game gets you excited, then stay tuned. And if it doesn't, well, stay tuned anyway, because I need the views, and my mom says she almost watches me now instead of playing her Candy Crush. Not quite, but almost, and I'll take that as a win. Now, the goal of Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters is to be the best monster hunter in the land. You're a monster hunter, but not like Monster Hunter, because that's TM'd, and not like The Witcher, because that's copyrighted. But you're just a generic monster hunter who needs a lot of money. But also, throughout the game, you can always use your money to spend on various things that you can then use to hunt harder to defeat monsters. And so this game quickly becomes a choice of how much do I spend and on what. And that choice of how much do I spend immediately begins with the auction phase, where you will bid for characters, starting location, and kingdom knowledge, because each of the 6 kingdoms in the land have a specific knowledge that you can learn, which will then make fighting various monsters in the land a lot easier. And then auctioning as well your beginning magical abilities. And I love this. I love this to open the game. Everyone will start with a 100 coin bonus. But if I want that character more than you, and you've bid on the 100 coin bonus, I can bid on the 70. And then someone else could bid on the 40. And then I could move over and bid on the 70 for something else. And eventually we will all be bidding on one character, and that will be your character for the game. It balances out the characters that are in high demand, and I love this choice. Each character feels different and has different strengths, and also importantly will determine the future turn order for auctions, because they all have like an initiative number in their top right corner. So you'll auction your characters, you'll then auction off your starting location and kingdom knowledge, which again is important because some of the kingdom knowledges are further off the beaten path than others. Depending on how the game is set up, there will be various monsters to be found in different provinces, so you might want to be closer to those. You might want to start closer to a capital city, because that's basically where you can do all of the things that you want to do and nowhere else on the board. And then your magic, you're also going to need to balance with your character's strengths. It's a fun process. So once the auction is done, you will play for 2 years, which is 24 rounds. 1 month equals a round. And each round boils down to a lot of things that I will attempt to condense here so that you can get a sense of the game. The basic shape is you're going to get some cards and resources, and then you'll place your action tokens, which are like workers in a worker placement game. They can go on one spot, either on your own board or a communal board where you're fighting over those spots. You'll get to place 1 worker a turn, go until everybody's finished using their workers, proceed to get more cards, and so on and so forth. There's also 2 different special rounds that will pop up from time to time. One called a flow round, which will allow you to use your special magical ability because you're more in tune with the flow of nature. You feel the magical energy that is surrounding our Tosia or Arcosia, whatever the land is called. And so that's always a great round. And then there will also be a bidding round where you can use the cards that you would have used gaining other resources. You're going to spend those cards to get special items. And the main bulk of the games, or what you're going to try to be doing on your actions, is running around the board, calling dibs on monsters in the area. It doesn't matter that the famed monster hunter Gerald of the River is here and could take down the monster in one swing. No, you went to the tavern first and you called dibs, so Gerald's not gonna go to fight that monster no mo. And you can spend as much time as you would like preparing to fight that monster. But depending where you took that monster off the board, it might also cost you money to get information about what monster is even in that cave or location. You could go into that cave and think, I can deal with anything that's here and fight it blindly, only to realize that it's completely impervious to physical damage when you get there. Or maybe you could ask the former monster hunter who got his legs and arms bitten off whether or not his sword had any use on the thing. Now, even though you are calling dibs on the monsters that you want to take out, you can only call dibs on 2 monsters and then a special level 3 monster because, you know, they're the scariest ones. But at a certain point, you're gonna have to deliver. You can't just be the piece of garbage stopping Cece the famous witch from completing her bounties forever. Now, in addition to all of the monster hunting that's happening, there's also this reputation track that you're going to be moving up on, and every time you cross a threshold, you get more gold every time you slay a monster, or certain bonuses on the track. But every time you move up the track, you're also going to be moving up on this little mini track as well. And it is the person who gets to the end of that track that gets a special one-time bonus token, and then that bottom track will reset. You'll still stay on your position and the top one, but there's always this constant little mini game of fighting for reputation, and when do you go and complete your quests that will give you reputation if it's only going to be wiped clean and the race will start again. In addition to that, you'll also want to visit herb gardens and gather ingredients or gather potions or interact with famous people at the city that you're in or deal with whatever taxation or decree the current king of the province has said for what you're in. Have I mentioned there's a lot going on? Then finally, after all of your preparation is done, you'll get to the battle phase. And this might be the part of the game that could make you pause because it's quite simple. There was going to be another whole deck building game that you would then use to fight the monsters. They have a full podcast about their design process, and I've talked to the designers as they were wanting me to review this game, but it took way too long in an already long game, and they decided to cut it in favor of a more push your luck mechanic. Because you can go to the spot and fight the monster whenever you want. Even if you don't know about it, or even if you do know about it and you decide, yeah, I will go fight a werewolf in the middle of a full moon. That sounds like a good idea when he'll be at his weakest. You can still fight it, or you can take the time to gather more knowledge, gather more stat boosting abilities, prepare for it, and make sure that you can't lose. Both of these, I think, are viable strategies. But if you dislike people who just get lucky on dice rolls, well then you might dislike this battle mechanic, because each monster will have a stat, an attack stat, and that will be modified by its own boosting of strength for certain things and its negating of strength for your own things, the things that you've done to prepare to fight this beast. You basically add and subtract all the modifiers and then roll 2 dice and see if you beat that number. If you do, the monster takes a hit. If you don't, you take a hit. If it's tied, you roll again. And you keep doing this until either the monster is dead, you run away, or you die. Or you would die. You're at the bottom of your health track and you take another damage. You don't die because, according to their official rules video, a player cannot die in Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunter because dying just isn't fun. But those are the battles. You're going to go to the cities, get as many bounties as you can, complete those bounties, get money and reputation for completing the bounties, go out, complete more bounties. Be the best monster hunter in the land, be the person with the most money at the end of the game, the end of 2 years, and you win. That's the overview. Hopefully that gives you a sense of this game, but let me tell you, this game is huge. I absolutely love the auction mechanic to get you started. This game starts off with such a bang. The different characters feel fun, the bidding back and forth depending on what you want to try out, depending upon which characters seem best or are statistically better if you've played this game multiple times, or even just the ones that fit with your playstyle, or you can see upcoming which ones might mesh well with the magic that is going to be bid on later. I love this auction mechanic. I think it is such a fun way to start a game, and I think a lot of games could learn from this. On the flip side, you have this other board that is only used for auctioning. And in Tabletopia, it's way up in the corner because they're like, yeah, you use that and then you put it back in the box. It adds to the component count, which we will get to in a second. But I don't know, I still like it. I really enjoy starting out this way, and it makes you feel like you've already started to take control of your own destiny. Then there's the preparation phase, which I didn't even explain, but it's the gather cards and get resources phase. And that happens at the beginning of every round. And I also love this little mini game. It's kind of Ticket to Ride-esque. You're going to draw 2 cards, and then you can play as many cards from your hand that share a common symbol or a common color, and then make a choice to choose that symbol or color. Some of the cards will have multiple options, some of the cards will only have one thing that you can do. It's not quite clear, it should just be a slash to indicate that it's either or instead of the weird symbol of the actual province. Everyone who I've played with has been confused by that iconography, but again, this is a prototype, things are in flux. I'm sure, or I hope, that some of this stuff will change to make it a little bit more readable. But that preparation phase is also fun. These are fun decisions to make. It's also great when you can just get free resources. It always feels good to get stuff in a game, and that is exactly what this preparation phase helps you accomplish. And in addition to other mechanics of the game that I love the reputation track. The reputation track was one of the things where I thought, okay, great, I am actively excited to play this game because of that little mini game on the bottom. Because I find in a lot of Euro games, if somebody's just barreling ahead on the track, it doesn't make sense to try and catch up with them. They're always going to be ahead, they're always going to be getting the first bonuses or whatever, and it's better to pursue a different strategy. But I love the little mini game because there's a constant reset, and you can choose if that bonus, and all the bonuses are very powerful, if it's worth it enough to really push your reputation. I found that I mostly focused on the reputation track more than any other part of the game because it is the part of the game that felt the most interactive. I really can't express the sheer size and scale of this game. And there's so much stuff that's been put into the game that feels cool. Instead of just a random weather deck, there have 4 weather decks, one for spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Each season having their own deck to represent more faithfully the type of weather that you would find in that season. Even your magic, which is called flow, you have physical flow or magical flow, they have their own cube colors because those colors are also on actions that are associated with using the specific type of magic. You can use a physical flow to take an additional action on your turn, which is huge. And this is great, but it also requires more tokens and more potential upkeep. There's the auction board, which is used and never touched again. There are hidden pathway cards that if you get them into your possession, it can make traveling across the land a lot more efficient. But they're also buried in a deck of like 55 item cards, which if you're playing a 2 to 3 player game, which is the only player count that I've personally tried it at, those aren't always going to come up. But don't worry, you can travel by boat. You can purchase a horse, which will cost you coins but give you a permanent boost to your movement. You can gain all sorts of magical knowledge if you go and study at the right temples. The preparation phase, which we just talked about and that I loved, could be an entire game in itself. And while all of this is fantastic, it contributes to potentially the biggest issue of this game, which is the size of it. Now, this may not be an issue for you, but it is one that is needed to be considered because even playing online, this game is huge. There is so much stuff, so many different tokens to keep track of, and so many different games to keep track of that the decisions feel a bit overwhelming at first. Until you realize that it's not actually a complicated game, it's just one with a lot of different systems running alongside each other. And so your enjoyment of the game may not be determined by how much you enjoy these systems, but it might be determined on not getting to spend an ample amount of time on the systems that you like. I wish there was more to do with these systems, more to do with the stuff that I love doing, but it never really melded into something fantastic. It just stayed as exciting parts in their own right. There's never a full sense of cohesion, unfortunately, that forms. And then there's the battles, of course. Now, this was pitched to me as a game where you can spend the entire 2 years building up and preparing for this final battle. And that's an exciting process, going around the land and building up your stats and getting better and getting ready to fight this monster so that when you do, you're fighting it in the perfect time, you've investigated it, you're fighting it in winter so it loses a point, you're fighting it in the light of the moon so it loses another point, you're fighting it with your legendary sword that you've managed to acquire with all of the knowledge that you've gained so it loses another point and it doesn't gain additional stuff because you know how to beat it. And I love that as a concept, but for me, there's not as many ways of building up as I want there to be. Because almost everything costs money, and the downside to spending money is that most things are one-time uses and not permanent bonuses. Even the things that give you permanent abilities, you have 4 to 7 chances to earn them in a game, the rulebook says, and that's just based upon the number of bidding rounds that actually come up. But there are also so many of those that it never really has felt consistent, at least in my couple plays, to level up your character. Because when you attack a monster, you're always rolling the same 2 dice. And you can purchase additional dice, but those additional dice are only used to activate certain abilities or equipment. And again, this is a really fun system. I like that this is the system that you are rolling these colored dice and they activate on a specific number. So if you want to have a consistent item, you need to invest time into building your dice pool so that you can assign them to various things. I think that's a fun game. It's just a game that I personally was never able to fully realize because it kind of falls flat if you don't have those extra items to activate. And so I think the strength of this game is also its biggest weakness, its size. The map itself is also so big, and I wish it were just a little bit smaller. It never feels truly interactive, and that's part of the reason why I enjoyed the Reputation track so much, because I felt like I could interact with people. But there was one game where we all started in different provinces, and there were enough monsters in those provinces that we never really had to fight each other for them. We just kept on bouncing back and forth to our own capital city, getting a new monster to fight, going out and fighting it. Whereas we all were craving a little bit of that sense of competition, the sense of running to an herb garden first to get that special thing, or going to the tavern quickly to get that best monster. Most of the actions that you can do are in the capital city, and there are only 6 spots on the board that are the capital city over hundreds of them, because there's, I think, 70 or so cities, and then there's these little black flags in between to represent the movement points that it takes to travel to that city, which again is a mechanic that I like, and I like the scope of it. And it needs to be this big because you have to go to the far reaches of the land to get different knowledge and to get different magic abilities and explore places and hopefully pick up quests and monsters along the way as you traverse the land. But it can also go the opposite way in that you never really run into your other competition. There's no way to grab a monster out from under the nose of someone who is going to take it. You're all just kind of doing your own solo game and then seeing what happens. But it's not a solo game because there are the communal action spaces on the board, which are important. They allow you to do great things, take first player and get reputation, just get an experience point, trade your experience point for double flow, whatever you want. These are important actions, and I like that you have to fight over them and that only one person can go there around. That makes that pull fairly significant, but it also stops you from potentially doing all of your turns or actions simultaneously and accelerating the speed of the game, which I think it would benefit well with. But to be fair, I also played this over Tabletopia. I can definitely see a world where people know the game. This could move fairly quickly. You can automate your things fairly quickly. You can do your separate dice rolls and someone can move on with their turn while you're battling a monster. There are ways to accelerate play when you're not playing with new people and you're not having to grab every single token in a painstaking way that obviously comes with playing this only online. I can see the benefits here. I can see that it will be a shorter game, but I also know that this will still be a long, epic experience. It says 45 minutes to 60 minutes per player, and I can see that being the case, which is also why I wouldn't want to play this with more than 3 players, because I wouldn't want to spend 6 hours in this world. I'd much rather spend 3 twice. So I suppose those are my largest issues. I wish that you had more permanent stat abilities to make you really feel strong and not like you always need to be guzzling down a potion of the night in order to take out the evil monsters. And I also wish the map was slightly smaller, that it would force a little bit more interactivity, or it would force you to scoop up all the monsters in an area and then have to set out to a new place as quickly as you could to get the next thing. Even with those complaints though, I had a good time. I think I enjoyed it more than the people who I played it with, but I specifically enjoyed it because so many of the things that you do feel fun and you get to do them and taste them a little bit all throughout the game, that I was always looking forward to going back to my next preparation phase, or I was always looking forward to racing someone on the reputation track. And these little things that built up over the course of the game, I really enjoyed doing. And that, in a sense, made up for the potential pitfalls of it feeling a little bit too large in scope. But honestly, at the end of the day, to me, this is the game that I wanted the Witcher game to be. This game draws me in more than The Witcher did. Although I do like in The Witcher you can fight over the monsters and not just call dibs and then have it in your possession. I do think this one is missing a potential of that interactivity, but again, I also only played this in the competitive setting. I never got a chance to try out the cooperative version which they have, or the solo version, which I assume is very similar to the cooperative version. You're gonna have a number of scenarios and then try to achieve them as a group over the course of a certain number of rounds. So if you were interested in the Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters, I still think legitimately this is one to keep on your radar. It might need a few tweaks to fall into that exceptional category, but there's still time for development as well. I definitely enjoyed my plays of it, and I would enjoy diving back in a non-Tabletopia fashion, because I think when you have it in front of you, perhaps on a table larger than mine, and people know what they're doing and are prepared to just whip through, it could be a pretty fun and dynamic experience. Anyway, I hope those initial thoughts were helpful in explaining what the game is all about and if it's worth your time or your money. If you do end up backing it, let me know, because I'm curious and I hope you enjoy it. And if you don't, well then I will see you in another video. My name's Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but I really need to figure out what I'm gonna do with all these monster heads that I've kept as trophies. I mean, so many. Water nymphs, it's ridiculous. The water nymph is actually a really cool piece of art. Some of the art isn't already done on Tabletopia, but the water nymph, you see like a woman in a stream, and then under the water you see she's actually like this raging octopus ready to like rip your skin off. It's pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Don't let the nymphs get ya.